roll right on. So welcome. I'm Adam, co-founder of Siegel, Seattle GNU Linux Conference. This year, Siegel turns 6 in Seattle, November. And I also run an engineering and data science team in Seattle for CSATs. Just to say a quick word that it's a healthcare pioneer in objective measurement and improvement of surgeon technical skill. Pretty lucky to work there, and we work with a ton of free software as part of our job. We do contribute back to some projects. And we're now part of the Johnson & Johnson Institute, so we can share our education tools with healthcare professionals worldwide. And I've got a bit of an adventure here today. There's plenty of room in case other folks show up, but they don't know what they're missing yet, because we're going to meet Louise and follow her through tears and joy, death and life. In the end, she'll only succeed if she's able to save the day with free software. Hang in there. I'll be reading some key points for the vision impaired. I guess we got the live stream all set, so I don't need to read for that. The deck is also online. Just go to adammonson.com. You can grab the deck in plain text and in rendered format. And this is just so I remember how to actually go through my slides. Creative Commons, good to go. Attribution share alike. This is the story of 4 chickens. Here they are. They met a hungry little furball, and they quickly became a flock of one. Raccoon versus chicken, it's like car versus bike. This is the story of the chicken who lived. Meet Louise, our stealthy Americana. I call her stealthy because she was the only one that survived all the attacks. She wants a new flock, but first she needs a safer home, one with an automatic door. This, of course, requires the following. I'm not going to read all. The point is that it's easy to get carried away, and I did, but it is important to solve your problem. So we'll get into iteration, but there is a lot at stake, so it's easier to get carried away when there's a lot at stake. So here's an example of when you mess up the timing for this kind of thing. Here you've got Rainbow sitting on top of Afro, but don't worry, we'll focus and iterate, and eventually we'll end up with this. So here's the coop my partner and I built. And it's a coop inside of a shed. The controller computer's up here. There's wires going everywhere. You can't see them because the sensors are pretty small. There's a light sensor over here. There's the motor right here. There's Hall effect magnetic sensors here and there. And you kind of have an open breadboard up here with a Raspberry Pi. It makes everything easy to plug in. So let's zoom in a bit. It's a 4-bird coop. Got a nesting. There's a nesting box. So kind of the chicken part of it is actually where they lay their eggs. This is where they get their water, food, and there's the door to the world outside. So let's zoom in on the door. That's the point of this talk. This is the door open and closed. Open during the day, closed at night. So, oh, by the way, I don't know if I said, but I welcome questions in the middle. Just like interrupt me if they're on topic, and if they're not, I'll just kind of say, well, I'll kind of scoot it along. But go ahead and yell out, and I'll deal with it best I can. Here's the Raspberry Pi controller computer. It's got computer power. You're looking at the computer itself. Breakout board, so you can plug everything in. There's power. And okay, good, that's the plan. So this is the gravity lock mechanism unlatching. And this is just the door traveling up. And with the camera, we get, I'm going to come back. There we go. So we get motion-activated video capture using the program Motion. It's off the shelf on all the popular repositories. But here's a couple image samples. First, this is Louise going in for the night. So she came in through the door, which was thankfully open because the software worked, and just pops right in there. And the other birds kind of figure it out too just by following her. If we were to add more birds in the future, I don't want to spoil the whole. Here's let's try that again. Here's a nosy neighbor. I don't know if you can see that too well. It's a squirrel. Just looking to see if there's any eggs, and then she didn't take anything. She just left. Just wanted to see who was there. I think the coop was brand new and I was watching every video. Let's check back on Louise. So she likes the new coop, but when it comes to that door, she's suspicious. That's okay, she'll get over it. It's going to keep her alive. But let's talk about chickens real quick, because this is important. Like the biology of chickens a little bit is important. So you got to know these 3 things about chickens. You can never get them wet, you can never expose them to sunlight, and you can never feed them after midnight. Anyone? Where's that from? Gremlins. Thank you. 1984. Let's try again. Gremlins in 1984. Okay, here's the real chicken primer. I don't know. I mean, they're that simple. This is how they work. I feel a little bad saying that. They do a lot of cool things, but it seems like it's automatic, like it's just built into their DNA. Here's a basic chicken input-output diagram. I drew this myself. And note that they also eat bugs and rocks. Okay, here's a couple fun facts about chicken eyes. The right is nearsighted, the left is farsighted. This is kind of interesting because while they're in the shell, while they're in the egg, the right eye goes up near the shell, the left eye stays in their feathers. The right eye becomes nearsighted as a result of this, and the left eye remains farsighted. The two eyes can operate independently. So the right eye could be seen for something up close, like bugs in the dirt, and the left eye could find a hawk at the same time. They're also quite large. The eyes are 10% of their head, so there isn't much room left over for brains. So we have to keep them safe. That's our job. And finally, they evolved diurnal, so their night vision is poor. They evolved after dinosaurs. I guess we helped them. But all this, they just, if you want to keep them alive, you must lock them in at night because of this guy. So that's it. Just take home message. The chickens get in before dusk. They're pros at this. All you need to do is lock it at night, every night. Oh yeah, every night. And open up in the morning, every morning. And in the summers around here, well, same as Seattle where I'm from, it's early, really early, and you'll forget sometimes. It's not so bad to let them if you forget to let them out, but if you forget to lock them in, that's bad now. So let's get this rolling here. Here's the long and the short about automating the door itself. And we'll quickly run through these. So the kind of hardware we used, the little computer, the one I chose is the Raspberry Pi. It's not free. Disclaimer, this is Libre Planet. You can find free ones. The Libre T is interesting. BeagleBoard, I think is closer, but I'm not an expert in open hardware, but there are folks here that are. But the software is free because I wrote it. Anyway, let's zip through the hardware real quick. The Pi, the computer itself, $50. A couple other things, some wires. This was the fun part, is parting it out. Fuse, yeah, I ran it with a fuse without a fuse for a while, and my good friend said, "You're crazy," because I can always tell that, Anyway, don't do that. Also, power supply is kind of important. I went, yeah, so it comes with a power supply, but you got to get an extra one because the original one is unregulated, and oh boy. Here's kind of the layout of the computer. The Pi 3 is now not the latest model. Now I think there's a more recent one. But here's the basic components. Any questions? It's pretty standard. I mean, what's crazy is, from in the previous talk they were talking about the bombe, BOMBE, the computer that helped crack the Enigma. I mean, if you compare the size and just how far we smashed this, kind of following Moore's law into this tiny compact system is pretty incredible. Here you go for the breakout of the hardware. You get all kinds of cool little gadgets with the starter kit. It's $30. I only used a fraction of these for this project, but I was interested in using. I think for a future one, it'd be fun to use this LCD. Now this is kind of a more complicated component, and so it has all these pins, and I think you follow a pattern to wire that up, and then you can control the software. I haven't got to that yet, but I'll show you the ones I did. Camera is extremely easy. Plug it in. You get night vision. These are infrared lamps, and these are detectors to see if it has to switch to infrared mode, visible light mode. Wires. This is kind of important. You got to have a low-geared motor. So it's called a worm drive. It's kind of fun. This is kind of your standard motor, but then this gearing box is pretty critical to get it down to just the right speed. You can't take one of those little spinny motors This is what I tried first. And then you try and hook that into a dowel that's turning the string that's going to raise the thing because it doesn't have the torque you need. So $13 for a fuse. Don't forget the fuse. And 32 gig SD. And you can't do this 64 with the Raspberry Pi. Anyway, don't worry about all these gotchas. I figured them all out so you don't have to with your next project. And this is the thing that can detect magnets, called a Hall effect sensor. A magnet comes near it, and you get, I think it's just, this one's just binary, and so it tells you once a magnet is within a certain range. This is pretty key for detecting when the door is actually closed, like did it work successfully? You can't just assume. Test leads for just, because I think I still haven't soldered most of the wires, but once you have the thing set up, they're clipped together, just don't touch it, unless the chickens kind of come by and flap them off, so that's something we got to fix. Oh, and a regulated power supply. Make sure you don't use the one out of the box. Oh, and then, so my partner did the woodworking. She's also a mathematician, software engineer, but she's also better at me than at carpentry, and so she did all that stuff. And all the initial pictures built all that in the door itself. So I did the software part. Now, I apologize, my emojis aren't showing up. They're kind of important actually because I use a lot of emoji for visual cues, and there's particular visual cues. Oh, I have actually images embedded here. You'll see the emoji later. But it's important for just, if you're going to quickly scan logs, you don't even have to read the text if you have emoji. I think it's pretty handy. So just the little icons that show you what's going on. So real quick, I'll detail into the door itself. It looks pretty complicated, but basically you have two door states, closed and open, and just, this is kind of a state transition diagram. This is how you get from open to closed, depending on the situation. If you guys want to take a look at that real quick, and then. Any questions? Yeah, it's pretty simple. So when it's closed, we can either force it open with a command, or we can wait for dawn to happen, and then we set up a lock so these two things can't be trying to happen at once, because you only have one door. And then when you successfully start it, it's actually opening, and then it either times out or it successfully hits the top magnet. And then at that point, the door is open, and similarly for nighttime or forced close. Okay? Okay, so Logmoji. Oh, good, I do have a screenshot. Okay, so honestly, this is like, okay, if you got to look at the log, I'm just like, I skipped all these because I'm like, oh, this is just status, I don't care. But then when you want the detail, so again, just the pictures help you just scan really quickly. And this is actually a text sample, and I think this browser just doesn't have the emoji fonts, but this would show these exact same icons. This is, I have been using Slack to do logging, but this is a plain text log, and I'm going to change it to log somewhere else. It's free. So yeah, that starter kit with all those tiny little parts, you got to get one of those to get started, unless you actually happen to have all this stuff in your garage or pockets or already. And this particular company offers email support too, and I did email them a couple times because their Python library was working for some things and not others, and similarly for the C libraries. So they came with both a C SDK and a Python SDK, and I always try Python first, just higher level, simpler to get started. But for some of the things I actually had to use their C code and mess around a bit. But the kit really does help you, all that messy stuff in between. Okay, it's how do you make a thing in the real world move with just a line of code? They walk you through all of that. Here's project one from that Adeep starter kit. You plug in a few parts, and you can blink an LED with a line of code. That was pretty enticing to me. I was like, oh, okay, well, I get the fun part of plugging in these wires, and then boom, you can run one command to do the blinking. So some guidance you want to, a lot of the point of this is to try and inspire you to okay, fine, I'll finally get one of these and a few wires, and I'll think of something, right? I'll check when the temperature in my house goes above 100 degrees, I'll send myself a notification, something like that. It should inspire you to do your own stuff. So, but it's fraught with disaster all along the way, and so what I'm trying to do here is give you a lot of tips to get through it successfully. I did a little time-lapse video kit. While I was getting used to it, I did a lot of projects with the kids, and one of them was just, okay, this computer's going to beep, and every time it beeps, it's been a minute, and then you can go then you can wait till you hear a camera sound, and then move the thing, and they were doing that for hours. So we got them moving Lego guys and all around for days. So free childcare, and then $30 childcare. The other part here, so I also want a hat tip to, the Pi is not free hardware, but check out the EOMA standards, EOMA 68 standard and others. These are linked to here. Those are links. Oop, sorry, I got a different screen here. Always ask for help. Browser's not showing emoji, but there would be lots of emoji, and I should just call the stock chicken emoji, I think, the amount of I'm pushing my emoji. So some things to keep in mind here. Again, general tips, tricks, things you can run along the way. These are hardware bugs that the Raspberry Pi folks will probably fix along the way, power consumption and how it starts and notification of if you do have too many things plugged in and the power's going low, it'd be great to know about that. But I run this one as the one at home headless. And so you have to be watching logs when stuff happens. And it was pretty important to me that it was Wi-Fi, but it also had to work if there was a network partition, if the Wi-Fi went down. And use a 32 gig card. Try that camera. The hardware part, hardware is called hardware for a reason, I think. I think people are good at it, but I spend a ton of time on the software and trying to make that bulletproof. But no amount of software is going to fix a spindle that's trying to open the door and it's just slipping. It's just like, so I'd be like throwing more glue at it, that kind of thing. You can get it to work. This thing's been running for a couple of years at this point now. Oh, PWM, that's a fun thing. I want to say pulse width modulation. So that's where you try and take a spinny motor and make it into a slower motor, and you can slow it down, but you can't give it torque just on its own. So PWM is basically telling it to move, instead of just sending power to it like this, on, off, you're going and adjusting the pulses until they get it to the right speed you want. So you can make a fast motor slow, but you can't just give it torque. You need gearing for that. Some of the easier things, so it's really easy to play with a magnetic sensor. You can do think of all sorts of cool projects you can do with that. The light sensor as well, it just kind of works, but with this gotcha here that the Python photoresistor code didn't work. But with those kind of things are basically 2 wires, plug in, try the thing, and you get the thing wired up on that breadboard, and then you can run code right away that gives you the output. I mean, usually most of these are, so Hall effect is a binary, so you'll get a 1 or a 0 if it's in the field or not. The photoresistor gives you a range, so you get from -160 to 160 or so, and it's tuned so that 0 is dusk or dawn. So if you're doing a photoresistor project, I want to do something along with the sun. The sun comes up, I'm going to detect it. All you have to do is look for it passing 0. Now you want a threshold, right? You want to think through this a bit. Like I did the software and I made it 0 to start. Well, there's bounce, right? So you might go above 0, and then a car might drive by and shine at it, so it bounces a little bit. So basically, you say, consider it dawn when it passes 10, and consider it dusk when it passes -10, or something like that. So you set a little range, and then outside of that range is a clean dusk-dawn barrier. But those are pretty fun projects because they're all, a few lines of code, get started, you get more complex, you can iterate. So kind of a real space problem is that these supposedly nocturnal predators, like, oh, they're fine during the day, right? No, chickens are also not fine during the day. So they have to be fenced in entirely. I mean, that's why at the zoo, I suppose, they're all in this, there's fencing and all over the place, because sometimes raccoons are hungry during the day, or they're injured, or there's new babies, or it's spring, or there's 100 things. Or maybe a hawk is flying by and it's really sunny. I think my partner the other day caught a hawk holding on to Afro, one of the little ones, and just scared her off. The hawk wasn't strong enough to pick her up. thankfully, or tear apart. But you have to have the chickens fenced in entirely. Now, you still want the door closed at night, though, because if you got the coop and it's open, rats will come in and get food and stuff like that. So, yeah, so this was kind of cool. With the data about the light levels moving over time, you could see the eclipse happen. And so I made a little chart, and sure enough, it happened to go, I think it was through Corvallis, Oregon, but pretty near Seattle. And so we got a good enough effect from that full total, the total eclipse recently. Always MLP, the minimum lovable product. I use that instead of viable because I'm like, viable is like, it's barely alive. I want the thing that's easy to do and fast, but I gotta love it. Otherwise, I don't want to. I didn't do this for. I'm not getting paid. I do this for fun, and the chickens need it. And of course, use free software. So this is kind of funny, and yeah. So I've been throwing my videos up on YouTube, so I'm like, I don't care, whatever. And they detected that there was a content violation. I wonder if I can play. Do I have the actual one? I don't have a link to it. If somebody asks me, I'll gladly make a link to the actual video, but it's like the picture I showed, the video I showed earlier was just a chicken. It's a chicken in the coop. So there's no way. We built the entire coop. We bought the chicken, grew up. There's no way that's a copyright violation. Anyway, censorship. Think about it when you choose the software you work with. There it comes. Let's see. So yeah, these are just links to get the parts yourself. And more parts. Thank you. It's kind of funny, this slide. There's a lot of M's. I don't know why, but I think that says something. I just did a quick visual frequency analysis. I'm like, a lot of M's. Anyway, I want to hear what works for you. Try something out. I want to hear what you think about this presentation and everything as well. So please let me know. Thank you. And do you guys? Now we have some time. I made a little time for questions. So let's do it.
Yeah. So there's a mic here. If you want to come up and ask.
Yeah. So acceptable topics are chickens, hardware, and software. Hey, Deb.
Hi. It's so great to finally see this talk. My question is, I know you did a lot of this with your kids. Like, can you give folks at home, like, what sense of age group the different parts of the project are for? So if someone's like, oh, and they're like looking at their 6-month-old, you're not throwing them in the chicken coop yet. But like, when are they ready to start participating on the code and the other parts?
Oh, totally. Great question. Thank you. Well, I think so part of it's like parenting style as well. And so I wanted to wait a little later to get them in front of screens at all. But our 6-year-old was stoked to participate in for example, the time-lapse video experiment. So as I was learning the Pi, I set up the time-lapse camera, and they could move stuff around, and then I just hit a button and compile the video. And they loved seeing that. So 6-year-old, getting involved in the code, I would say like a 10-year-old. I mean, every kid's different, but ours, at this point now, she's writing code and interested in it, and she could totally hack the Python stuff. And of course, if there's anything, I'm like, okay, you can play any game you want as long as you load it from the command line. So, and then that includes moving the chicken door. So if you use the command line, you can move the chicken door. So she knows how she can like magic open. Now, we don't, so yeah, and roughly in general, I'd say around then. Yeah,
Cool.
okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, good question. Anything else? Is anybody, okay, let me ask you guys a question. You folks a question. So who has done hardware projects? Period. Okay. Who hasn't but wants to? Come on. Okay. If you're going like this, it means you want to. So the thing, yeah, it's all right. So one thing we did at a Siegel talk, actually, 2 years ago, somebody brought a bunch of breadboards and a battery and an LED light. That was, you just like, okay, fine, I'll try it. And you plug it in, and you're like, oh, well, that did something. And then you could control it with your own software. I don't know, the light kind of turned on for me when we just started plugging stuff in. And it gets tangible. Because code is so intangible. I think it's very, unless you just have this really insane drive to want to do more code, then it's hard to connect it to people's lives. I mean, software is for people. So I think the hardware can really bridge the gap. And there's so many choices now with the cheap kits, stuff like that. So hard to get excuses for that. What else?
Can you tell us about safety? Can a chicken get crushed by the door?
Oh, man, I get that question every time, and that is a great question. Yes, I'll tell you about safety. So they don't get crushed in the door for a couple reasons. One, it's not that heavy, and they're strong enough to fend it off. And when they're scared, they're fast. So the time, that didn't sound good. I'm not challenging them with it, but basically no. It's not an issue because it comes down slowly on a reeled up string, and so it's not a hazard to them so much as if it were driven. It's not hard driven like by a gear. They do have those kinds of doors though, and in fact, I'm a little sad to say now they do sell a light activated chicken door, but it costs more than this. But you don't have to do any of the project. But of course, you don't get the experience of learning which parts to do and not do. But did I answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Second question is, can you imagine extending this to open like a human door for dogs?
Yes, absolutely. So like a normal door you'd have in your house. Yeah, I think the difference is you need to control a more powerful thing. So basically, your challenge at that point would be coming up with a mechanism that opens the door, which does have to be pretty beefy, right? Unlatch and move a big physical door. We put a lot of pounds of pressure on that. But the Pi side, I mean, that would be the simplest code ever, honestly. You just have to control a switch that does the rest. Almost all the difficulty there would be in hardware. So yeah, opening, closing, like all these little actions. Detecting something that's binary, incredibly easy. So the a magnet comes into place. So you could think about one of the big things that happens with installing a security system is we're going to put things at every door and window. Well, that is the simplest part of the whole system. It's just a Hall effect sensor, and there's a magnet in the moving part, and that's it. But yeah, good questions. Thank you. What other? I want to ask you guys another question. How about? I was going to ask about who knows how to write a little Python code or shell code, that kind of stuff. Okay, so you could all absolutely code on the Pi. None of my stuff is, well, there was a couple things I dug into a lot, but now you don't have to, because I told you don't have to, but PWM, pulse width modulation, is tricky code. And so I was messing around with that a little bit. But you don't have to do that now. But the simple code, like, oh, is the light on, is it dawn, do something? Easy code, no problem. It gets as complicated as you want, but getting started is very straightforward.
Another question, actually, you mentioned the EA-OTA68 board as an alternative to the Pi because it doesn't have quality firmware.
Yeah.
Is that commercially available, actually? Are there better choices, like, for example, the Freedom Box people out here have various ARM boards.
Mm-hmm.
The
EOMA 6.8 is a standard, and I believe the Libre T meets that standard. And it looks like a PCMCIA card, right? Okay, so I assumed there were prices, and if you just search EOMA 6.
I was wondering why you picked that for this kind of task, because it doesn't have GPIO ports, same as your Pi has. So it's easy to.
Oh. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, this is a PCMCIA port.
Yep, no.
Break it out.
That's a great point. So yeah, that's what's so convenient about the Pi is that breakout board where you just start plugging wires in. So it tells you all of the wires and where they go. I'll just show you the diagram of. Let's get to the. Well, that's mine broken out, right? So it's extremely easy to just. In fact, we could have probably added 4 or 5 more sensors on that breakout board. But so I don't know. How would you do that with the EOMA?
So, I mean, I have done this with QB Truck, for example. It's a lot harder with the Pi.
Oh, thank you.
It's a lot harder to do it with a QB Truck, or I assume with a Lime board, than the Pi, even though they have a very similar GPIO setup, because you have to enable the pin. And I guess you can enable some simple GPIO pins that are just echoing things to the file and the kernel turns it on. But if you're doing something more complicated, like using one-wire sensors and stuff, the Raspberry Pi makes it all very simple. It's in the bootloader, and this other stuff, you have to go hack the kernel.
I think that'd be extreme. So the question originally was, an EOMA 68 computer doesn't have a breakout board for plugging all these things in like we have pictured here. So how would you actually use one? Yeah, it sounds like a great business opportunity to make that intermediate part to break them all out or allow inputs in different lines. I would be surprised if someone hasn't made it yet. Do you mind getting the microphone back to him? Thank you.
How exactly does the part work where the chicken, where at a certain time of, in the evening, the chicken approaches the gate and the camera, the image code determines that it is the chicken and not a fox, and then it begins the door activation.
I didn't make that part of this project. You were saying how would it work? Yeah, we could walk through that. I thought through that a bit. So the question is, how would it work if? Let me just make sure I get this right. I know they could hear you already, but how would you do it? How would you detect the animal approaching the door and confirm it's a chicken? Yeah. Well, I guess the way I would do it is honestly, you could go with computer vision, that kind of thing, and machine learning. But I think I'd rather try and stack the deck in my favor and use RFID tags on the chicken legs, because those have a decent range, and then we're dealing with pretty close ranges in the coop anyway, and so you just need in fact, we're looking at the right place here. If you just had kind of a detector board right here, the thing that has the induction loop and sends the current and all that could be right here, and then each chicken passes, and then what you want to do is confirm maybe 10 minutes of them being present, so maybe you get a bunch of readings within 10 minutes, and then they pass the threshold, and you're like, oh, they're probably all in there, and close the door based on that. I guess I would not do the photovoltaic sensor and light checks at that point, because then you'd have two signals that would disagree. But I guess you could decide what to do and notify yourself if they disagree. That's the time where you need human intervention, right? To check. Oh, human maybe got left out. Anyway, that's the way I do it.
So right now, I mean, I can be done very soon, but right now, if there's any movement near the gate and it's evening and the chicken is outside the gate, then it opens the gate, and then once it's inside, it closes the gate, and then it doesn't open until morning, and the chicken moves.
You could, no offense, I call it over-engineering, because you don't need it closed while they're not in it.
And it can just be a moving thing, at the risk of it being a tumbleweed, right?
Say again?
So basically, something moves near the gate opens.
Yeah.
It goes in, then the gate closes. Then
something else could trigger it.
Then the gate doesn't open.
Yeah.
And this is in the evening. And then it's nighttime. And then at sunrise, then it waits till something is near the gate, and then it opens.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, the chicken is, it has to be moving. So if it fell asleep near the gate, it doesn't open right away. But
I think you and the other person were asking a similar question as far as like, I'm thinking of a door that's triggered by something coming up to it. And there is one project documented pretty well with the cat comes up to the thing and it's got facial recognition. It's just that particular cat structure. Somebody did a whole rundown on that. And I could imagine adding that algorithm, I mean, just with the camera. In fact, that's the camera right there, just pointing down in the coop. You point that out, you could totally use the same technique they're using. Okay, the thing comes close, you have computer vision that detects, gets a picture in the right format, compares it. Be tricky to make that fast. I mean, you need like a mobile net architecture for the image recognition maybe, and those don't perform quite as well, and so you probably have false positives. You have to look at your true positive rate, make sure it's looking good. But that is significantly more complex, I would say, and probably have quite a bit more error. Yeah, but I could see how it'd be a lot more it'd be useful for a cat door or dog door, that kind of thing. Chickens, you let them out into a fenced area, make sure that it's closed at night, good to go.
who else wants?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Who else wants to talk?
Oh. Any more questions? All right. Let's go on. Thank you.